kia ora koutou. Welcome back to School Briefs. Um, have we settled on that as a name, Claire, or is it just a placeholder?
I don't know. It's been a placeholder for quite a while. Do you know, I found out something the other day. Did you know that if you do more than 7 episodes of a podcast, you're like in the top 5% or something of all podcasts? Because most people don't last for 7. And I was trying to work out, have we made our 7th podcast yet? Maybe it's time to settle after that.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Does that mean that we would have core listenership?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll have to find out, and maybe we can put out a poll. Is School Briefs cutting it, or do we need to actually get a bit more clever than that? Anyway, this one's an exciting one because we have a special guest with us this week. We've got Hemi McDonald, who is the Chief Executive of PENZ, Physical Education New Zealand, joining us this week because, my goodness, it was an interesting this week in terms of the reporting that we've had through with the curriculum consultation closing. We've had some great reporting from the newsroom. We've had some great reporting from John Gerritsen at Radio New Zealand, talking about the broad concerns and the broad level of pushback around the consultation as it looks, around the curriculum reforms as they stand at the moment. And then lo and behold, we have our minister come back online. She went on Heather du Plessis-Allen. I won't go back over that interview. I blew my foo-foo valve when I listened closely to that interview because of the way that our educators and our ministry was referred to. But also did another interview with John Gerritsen where she talked about the fact that teachers are hugely on board with our curriculum reforms as they stand at the moment. And I'm a little bit confused. Liam, are you a little bit confused by this statement?
I'm worried about the massive disconnect from a Minister of Education who talks about the need for data and somebody that decides things are hugely positive because she was at a conference of 500 people. Because I've also been told that she knows she's doing a good job because she gets emails from people telling her that she's doing a good job. I wish it was that easy to be able to cement your performance by whether or not you've got a kind of thumbs up or thumbs down ratio in your inbox.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting time. So I thought it was really important that we get one of those people that wrote one of those submissions who actually has taken the time to engage with and canvass a whole lot of educators around their thinking, and has also done work with a whole lot of other subject associations. So Hemi, I'd love to pass over to you and just hear a little bit around your perception in terms of whether our educators are hugely on board, or what is actually the feeling out there in the space that you are working?
Yeah, kia ora korua. I think none of this should come as a surprise, and I think that's probably what was most jarring this week is that it seemed to be a surprise that there was discontent or dissatisfaction with the draft products. We had subject associations, and we were one of those subject associations, calling for a pause of the release of those products back in October. So none of this should really have come as a surprise. And at the end of what has been a 6 months of, for many, a grueling 6 months of trying to engage the education sector when they're already kind of overwhelmed, it really shouldn't have been that surprising to the minister or to the Ministry of Education that they were going to be getting submissions that pointed out what has been quite clear from the very beginning of this whole consultation process. So what we are seeing at the moment, and certainly what I've kind of feeling is this: we're at this lull and we've submitted all of this work, and so now we're back into this process of trusting a system which hasn't really delivered yet on any of that kind of advocacy work that's been going on. So none of this should come as a surprise. The minister's kind of assertion that people haven't engaged or haven't read the documents is really just nonsense in my view. And I think part of that is because if you looked at the submissions, and I know from across lots of different organisations, and ours was one of those. We provided an alternative. So we went to the point of actually drafting something that we thought fit within the parameters the ministry were requiring, and gave it to them. So it just seems a little bit out of touch with what's been going on for 6 months. And that's a shame, because what we see play out on the socials and in the conversation is that teachers are just whinging. They don't want to teach. When in fact we've had teachers trying to deeply engage with this content to provide something meaningful back into the process. So that's kind of been the jarring.
And unions are bullying teachers or misrepresenting teachers. That's the other one. Like unions are forcing them to say that, or the unions say that, but no one actually thinks that within the union membership. It's like, hello, all of the unions I know, all of the associations I know are very careful to always gather data, gather voice, and only talk to the data that sits in front of them, and to, like, I keep going, is the minister got her head in the sand? Has she got people, has she become surrounded by people that are just telling her what she wants to hear and isn't actually getting the truth? Or is she actually being completely disingenuous and therefore gaslighting us as a sector?
Yeah, and I think that's the part of all of this is really it's not about the minister, and it is about the minister. And I think that's the part that the teachers that we talk to and that we have been working with are just, actually, we want something that is quality. We want something that does reflect Aotearoa New Zealand. We do want some work to be done. So there's a genuine desire to see something that's quality on the ground, but the systems and the processes that all of this stuff is being fed into lack transparency, or there's still a feeling of mistrust in those systems and processes. So the minister's comments might add to the weight of that all, but ultimately what we need to be able to go back to is the system going to respond to what it's hearing from the teachers? And we don't know, and that's, I think, a problematic place for teachers to be in, is if we can't trust the people who are supposed to be listening to us and supposed to be helping us deliver these outcomes.
I think a lot of us are hitting frustration point, aren't we? Because we actually don't, we are all, there's so many of us who have in the past rolled our sleeves up and been involved and keep offering to get back involved and are wanting to really proactively contribute. And it's that combination of being both shut down and then portrayed like we're moaning, we're not engaged, we're not reading it, we don't understand it. It's and I worry about the reputational risk that it's doing to how the voting public, are starting to see educators and school leaders and unions and okay, yep, there's always been that sort of unions are an easy thing to attack, it's easy pickings, but this constant narrative around school leaders and principals and teachers is doing real harm. I've enrolled in running Disrupt Ed on Facebook, as well as the AEC Facebook page, and I've seen such an uptick in non-education people seeking out posts and comments just to berate people, and it's really saddening. I mean, it's a really disappointing place that we find ourselves in.
I agree, and I think one of the quickest ways for people to kind of get a gauge of that is just to look at the comments on social media under any of these news articles when they're posted, and kind of see the way in which
the language being used.
The language that's being used on both sides of the fence, because it's very, very polarizing. And at a time where the argument is we need to strengthen the profession, we need to support teachers to deliver better outcomes for kids. Diminishing the profile of educators and creating these narratives is really unhelpful, because the community loses trust in the profession. And that, I agree, is one of the fundamental challenges we face moving forward, is even when all this stuff finally lands, the community has to trust the teachers to be able to deliver it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we're in this way of not being able to trust it to deliver, we've got a bigger problem. And that's something that I think is kind of outline all of this. None of this, I think, what I can say is, or what I've seen from subject associations, is they want the best. They're trying their hardest. They're a bunch of volunteers. They're not connected to unions. They're just teachers in schools who've got time to do some stuff. Probably don't have time to do some stuff, but are doing it anyway.
Yeah, but they make time. Yeah, absolutely. And
So
hugely knowledgeable about what works and what doesn't work and what
yes,
will
yeah, and
benefit people.
that's the thing that feels quite frustrating about all of
Mm.
this, and I think we've seen this play out not only in the Waitangi Tribunal hearing, but throughout this entire piece, is that evidence and the research and the experts keep pointing to a particular thing, and that keeps getting ignored. And that's quite frustrating for people who are trying to feed into a system to strengthen it, not just to pull it down, because that's not what's actually happening on the
No.
ground. People are not trying to subvert the process. In fact, they've tried to engage in it. And I think the other part that's probably been a little bit missed is, if you were a primary school teacher, you had to engage across 6 or 7 different curriculum documents.
They were
And
hard,
that
clunky, man.
do that, 6
Yeah.
months to do that is just not enough time. So we're not asking for what's unreasonable. We're just saying that there's a lot of stuff that has to be reviewed and tested and tried and looked at in order to get this thing right. And it's unclear on where things are going to head and land.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's where the likes of unions and the subject associations play a very deliberate and important role, particularly in that primary space around curriculum development, because there's just so many learning areas to get ourselves on. We kind of rely on the kind of volunteers that get elected in those positions to carry the voice of the profession. But you just get the sense that through the journey, the minister's been told, now you are going to be coming up against some criticism, and therefore she's kind of prepared to weather a level of that. And she's obviously got herself around the whiteboard with the comms team and wants to pick up on this phrase that it's just a vocal minority. But as you were touching on earlier, the point that she's missing is that teachers don't come to these discussions because they're bored and are trying to fill in time. They're thinking about, how is this curriculum going to transfer into my practice, and then from my practice out into the students, and then are these the types of skills that we want reinforced in this way when students go out into the world? And that's the bit. And there's been this recurring theme that Claire and I have picked up on the last couple of weeks around how the people involved in the government, they're not going to be the ones here in 6 years' time having to pick up the pieces. It's just that kind of short-termism that kind of plagues education that we've just seen amplified. But there was one part that I wanted to pick your brains about. And I think people will probably have a pretty kind of broad idea around the general direction of curriculum. But for those not familiar with your curriculum area, the ministers had a go at around the kind of removal of whole order and mental health. Can you kind of flesh out what's happened there?
Oh, probably a little bit out of my domain. I've tried to stay squarely in physical education, because there are other representatives that talk about the health component, and they're probably far better positioned to talk about it than I am. But one of the things I can say, of the 18-odd thousand words in the health and physical education curriculum, whole order is mentioned 0 times. And for the idea that a curriculum is supposed to be explicit in nature and to help to avoid ambiguity and to ensure that teachers know exactly what they should be teaching when, to not say something leaves ambiguity and vagueness. And so I think the point was not that it's not there. It's the point is that, one, you don't know that it's not there, and two, that with its absence, is there explicit enough instruction within the curriculum itself to be able to cover off whatever was covered under those concepts? And that would be true across the curriculum. So if we are implying stuff, it kind of defeats the purpose of what the ministry are trying to achieve. This curriculum was not about implied learning. It was about explicit, knowledge-rich, science of learning kind of focused stuff. And so those kinds of comments, I think, are unhelpful in that they characterize the curriculum in a particular way that it's not actually being designed to
Yeah,
be
and I think
presented.
it shows a huge disconnect with what the public expects out of a curriculum. Given the mental health crisis we have, parents will have a reasonable expectation that schools are moving into that space. And so to have a curriculum document that you hear from the minister, this kind of vaguely, well, it gets touched on a number of different ways without using it. I mean, this is meant to be the explicit. I mean, what I suspect has really happened there is that there's just this absolute aversion to any type of kaupapa Māori concepts, and they don't feel like they can talk about mental health without talking about hauora, and the idea of having hauora in a curriculum document was going to be a non-starter right from the beginning.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about quite a bit because it's how mātauranga is treated in these documents overall is interesting, and it's really difficult to ascertain whether or not there was a clear intent or just a sheer scrambling to try and get some stuff in there.
And I think there's a real mashup of doing it sounded like the minister got someone to do a command F for te reo words, and that was the evidence that Mātauranga Māori was present. This clouding of pasting te reo terms isn't the same as a Mātauranga Māori framework or principles.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to have Māori words in a document.
Yeah.
It's another thing for those Māori words to have meaning, to have place, to have context in which they exist. So I can talk about the PE component, for example. As we had kia ora hi in our curriculum, now no one is adverse to teaching kia ora hi, but kia ora hi was out of context. It didn't make sense in the sequencing of things. And then all kids in New Zealand have to do kia ora hi by virtue of the curriculum. Well, that doesn't fit for everybody. What about the pūrākau that comes to it? What about the localization of the pūrākau that influences kia ora hi activities? So there's all those kinds of nuances of the knowledge that's included. And so just dropping words in the document doesn't necessarily mean the mātauranga is actually there.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, the wider point there is there might be lots of words, but are those words the right words in the right place with the right background to be able to make them make sense?
Yeah, and I think, again, we come back to the removal of the 2023 Tamataiaho document and Dr. Wayne Nata's work. And I think there's frustration. I nearly think they did themselves a disservice continuing to use the Tamataiaho terminology in the new in name when you've gutted the document. You know what I mean? Why pretend? Use a new term, a new set of phrases.
And I think you will see and probably hear that more and more it's just being referred to as the New Zealand curriculum again.
Yeah.
And there will be probably some resistance around using Te Mātaiaho as the framing for that very reason. This is the New Zealand curriculum. As prescribed by the government, that whole kind of moving.
Prescribed and mandated.
Yes.
Very important. But I think it's really interesting. And to come back to this claim that people are hugely on board, it was interesting that SPANS, the Secondary Principals Association, had a pulse survey come out this week, results. And I think this is really interesting because I don't know a broader church than the Church of Secondary School Leaders around New Zealand. We have a very wide range of views, that means that sometimes we can butt heads a little bit in that space. But it was interesting to have 144 secondary school principals responded to the survey. And, it was loud and clear. 88.5% agreed that there's a risk that the current changes are going to widen inequities in our schools. 85% of them disagree with the statement. I support the requirement of the school boards to give the removal, of te tiriti. 85 are against the move that has been taken. 85% disagree with the statement that the current process taken for curriculum development has met the terms of engagement, consultation, and co-design. For a very broad group of educators up and down the country representing a whole kind, and a lot of those principals will actually appreciate, parts or a lot of what the minister is trying to do with her reforms. But this data is really clear. The vast majority are really concerned about the the consultation. So, I don't know how you can hear that data. Admittedly, this pulse survey came out after she made that particular statement, but how you can hand on heart say that people are hugely on board when we're seeing, primary principals, secondary principals, subject associations, unions who do have surveyed and represented a wide range of teachers. I don't know how we can make it any clearer.
The silly part here is that there's an attempt to make the argument binary, black and white, and I don't know any educators or teachers that work in black and white. They deal with young people and the lives and the communities that they live in. So,
and all of us want better outcomes. We want improvements.
So I think it's so unhelpful that it's if you're either on board or you're not on board. Well, it's actually okay to be on board and still have concerns, and it's also okay not to be on board, but to be supportive of one part of it or none at all. It's absolutely okay. It's okay to be somewhere. It's the lack of hearing and seeking to understand what those voices are trying to say in order to strengthen the reform process. That's what's most frustrating for me anyway.
And I think the worry is that it's not just us. It feels like it's a bit of a global, this binary politics. It's such a global thing at the moment, like whether it's talking about Trumpian or what's going on in the UK with the Reform, party. It's really unfortunate that it feels like everything is a swing one direction and a swing back in the other. And the thing that I keep coming back to is there's a measured middle ground that would actually satisfy both parties. There's stuff we could do that could probably meet much of the demands of those that want the knowledge-rich, more structured curriculum, more robust qualification framework, but not going so far that it's at the expense of those of us who really enjoy a flexible, responsive, localized curriculum. Like, you can do both. You can have a knowledge-rich, clearly scaffolded curriculum that is also flexible enough that it can be localized. You can have a, more robust qualification that still has elements of flexibility that enable us to contextualize it to meet the needs of our learners. The fact that we just seem to go, from one extreme to another is really frustrating because, and throwing around language, and as you say, it's coming from both sides. I think educators are getting so frustrated that we are seeing people getting personal about, politicians, ministers, ministry, whatever, which isn't ideal. But equally, it's really unfortunate when the minister, who is and those people who we look to stay above the line, are also defaulting to what feels like needlessly blanket attacks on our unions and our teachers and a whole lot of experts who ultimately want to do the right thing and do well by our young people. Want to work, and they want to work really hard to do it.
I think what's really important, excuse me, what's really important about that comment, Claire, is that criticism isn't just around the speed in which it's going. It is also about the kind of ideological swing to a far end of the spectrum that I think we have to keep coming back to, because that's the bit where I think they are most vulnerable, because the new curriculum direction has sidelined key competencies. They're there in name only. And there is a massive gap, and teachers know the value of kids participating and contributing, leadership, problem solving, critical thinking. Parents know the value of that as well. And it doesn't matter how many times you say knowledge sticks to knowledge. It doesn't kind of forego the need that actually students do socially construct learning together. And so, I'm just aware of the time and keen to.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be briefs. It's supposed to be brief, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Maybe that's why we need a new name. School longs.
Hey,
I don't know.
Are you able to flesh out the kind of next steps in the timeline and if you don't know what they are, kind of make up what you think's likely to happen?
I'll try not to make up anything and not to say too much that I shouldn't. But I think we know that the ministry now have to go through an iteration process of consolidating the feedback that's been received and to rewrite the phase 1 to 4 material. So my understanding that's underway and that's happening, and time will tell. And I think we can
And we have
probably...
phase 5 being developed at the moment as well.
And phase 5 has
Same
been
time.
in progress. And so what people can probably expect is over the next few weeks is to start seeing, and the ministry have indicated they're going to drop those materials in tranches based on priority of when those materials need to be delivered. So that should start happening very shortly, and then will be over the next month or 2 or 3 where people will have a chance. It seems as though that's going to be quite a quick turnaround, and so people need to be really prepared to engage quite quickly with that material. And then once all of that's done, presumably that'll be pieced together somehow, and either the first half, phase 1 to 4, sorry, not the first part,
Yeah.
phase 1 to 4.
This is the first time I can ever recall where a phase 5 has existed in complete isolation from phases 1 to 4.
I think this is probably something that people are going to have to get their heads around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it's a realization that I had over the last couple of weeks is that the phase 1 to 4 material is very much learning area focused, even though within those learning areas...
We've actually never had discrete subject curriculum.
And that's what's coming in phase 5.
Yeah.
What we can expect is that you will have materials for all of those subjects. And the learning areas become less of a priority, or probably deprioritized completely, based on the fact that it's actually just the subject that matters year 11, 12 and 13. So it will be an interesting dynamic for the community to figure out, especially in high schools where you're going to have phase 4 material, which is very learning area kind of, yes, there's subject specific stuff, but it's still learning area.
And also potentially, if they keep the current timelines, introducing phase 5 in 2028 when they're also introducing some subjects in phase 4.
There are some significant questions.
That's awesome.
And is it going to fit in? How's we're going to get it ready? The big questions that are left is what's the PLD look like? How do we support teachers who are going to be teaching stuff that they've taught before, even within those subjects themselves? There's all of that kind of question, and I suspect that might be something to keep an eye on for the budget coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very telling.
You got to fund all the phase 5 development, the PLD. So it'll be interesting.
Thanks for our segue, Hemi. We'll keep you on. Because when it comes to the budget, Liam, what do we need people to do?
Oh my gosh, Claire, people are fortunate. They've still got 6 days up their sleeve. To take 10 minutes to fill out a budget survey. This is going to be really important around how we look to kind of drive narratives around what educators want and hope to see out of the budget. There's quite a cool set of questions in there.
We can share it with this episode, can't we? So it should be linked below for people.
Yeah, interested not just in kind of where they think new spending needs to go, but also where they would look to reprioritise current spending from. And so it isn't a long survey, and most of it's kind of opt-in the way you do that. And so if people could find 10 minutes to sit down with a coffee and work through it, that would be great. It's currently the pin post on our AEC Substack and is open until Friday.
Awesome. Fantastic. And also just a brief reminder that the system reform bill, which is rather huge, is now in its second reading. So I'll maybe do just a little bit of an updated system reform bill 101 post to share through our AEC Substack, just to remind people of just how much is in that bill and what it actually means for us as a sector, because I know I personally am really concerned about a lot of the changes that are coming through in that system reform bill. It's passed the opportunity and committee and hearings to talk about it, but at least forewarned, make sure that we're actually across the changes that are coming in our direction. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Hemi, it's been fantastic to have your perspective and your expertise. Please keep up the fantastic work. It's been awesome watching the subject associations coming together and supporting each other in this time and space. And fantastic to see that sort of united voice that at the end of the day, like we've said many times today, we're all just here ready to get our sort of sleeves rolled up and want to do the right thing by our young people and by our teachers and get the best outcome that we possibly can.
Ka pai, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. Make sure, if you haven't already, fill in that budget survey, and we look forward to seeing you around about this time next week. Thank you.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.